Hi, this is David Baumblatt from Terabant Leadership. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it. This talk we're going to have today is about a time when I was in the FBI, and it relates, like always, to the bigger picture. And some people have asked, David, when you talk about the collapse and why you left America, how did this happen? When did this form? And I've given two specific dates. I said it was the year 2005 when I started to begin to think, which is a big deal, at least back then, or when maybe, I don't know how old you were, but when you grew up in America, I had never imagined America was going to collapse, civil war, never. Just, I don't even remember in high school, even when I was in college at West Point. But I think in 2005, that was when I began to at least start thinking about this American empire may collapse. And again, if you look at history books, you study history, this is not that far off, or it's not ridiculous. All empires do come to an end. The question is when. So 2005 is when I started first realizing that this empire may come to an end. And then in 2010, it got to the point where I reached at least enough confidence level. I said, yeah, this is going to be a house of cards, and I left. So it was, I'd say, between 2005 to 2010 is when I really solidified my decision to leave. So in 2005, now before I joined the FBI, I was in the U.S. Army. And when I left the U.S. Army to go into the FBI, I was still, you could say, a believer. This is what I said. I was very different than Dan Bongino, because I did a episode about him. And that was, he publicly stated to the American public that the FBI is a dysfunctional agency and that he was going to go in there to fix it, which he failed. No one's going to fix the FBI. No one's going to fix America. When I went into the FBI, I was a believer. I said, all right, I think this is it's a good agency. It's doing good work. And for God and country, let's do this. So let me tell you a little bit about the story with myself and a KGB defector who is under the payroll of the FBI. And then how it relates to the bigger picture. I'm just looking on here. Yeah, so I'm just looking at Shane. I know this is going to be a great one. Yeah, good to see you again, Shane. So again, what I'm trying to do is put a data point on this. And like I said, when I left America in 2010, now I do think this topic of America's collapsing and people leaving, it is becoming more mainstream. But again, you got to go back 2005, 20 years ago. I don't think it was. So as you know, the FBI and the CIA, generally, we attempt to recruit foreign intelligence officers. Again, I could do other videos on this. And again, I left the intelligence agency. I just really didn't want anything more to do with it. But this is, again, about the data point to understand to the American public about we're going to collapse. So again, back to the point, we recruit foreign intelligence agencies. Foreign intelligence agents, this should not be any news. And guess what? They try to do it with us. It's vice versa. And it's a lot about the spy game. So what the FBI did, this wasn't me, this wasn't my work. This was older generations of FBI agents, because this would have been in the Soviet Union days. So during the days of the Soviet Union, they had something called the KGB. Once the Soviet Union was disbanded, their new intelligence agency is called the FSB, which functions, again, I'm not a Russian expert, never said it, I didn't work against the Russian target, but the FSB functions as a dual FBI and CIA together, similar to the Chinese intelligence agency called the MSS. So anyway, this was during the Soviet Union era. This would have been older generations of FBI. Obviously, I don't have the specific files on it, nor I wouldn't deliver this in public. But anyway, and KGB agent was recruited by the FBI, was utilized by the FBI, and eventually that KGB agent defected from the Soviet Union, emigrated on the behest of the FBI to America under a plausible identity, or you could say hidden identity. Very similar, you could almost say, to the Marshals, the Witness Protection Program. They would have a new identity protected. That person would be under the government paycheck. And then from then on, that person would act, you could almost say, like an inside consultant to the FBI. And the FBI could even give this asset out on loan to other intelligence agencies, but the identity would be protected, and to help the FBI about understanding Russian intelligence, understanding Russian politics and whatnot. So again, I'm looking at the comments here. 100% nobody would have believed America collapsed. Yeah, and again, this is, and when I had this talk, we'll get into the details with this KGB defector. It wasn't, I came away with absolutely America's going to collapse, but these are part of the data points that continue to go down the line. And I say again, by you listening to me right here, you should also, as an American citizen, understand that this is also another major data point in my story that America's collapsed. Meaning, why are all the politicians ignoring me? No American citizen should be put on the FBI terrorist watch list, not welcome back in America, and the FBI cowardly, because they're corrupt, refusing to communicate to me. This is another data point that you should be seeing, like, this system isn't working very well. So what I want to do, so hopefully that gives you a little bit information before the story is done, and that is the FBI and the CIA, we go out, and there's many types of people we target, but a very creme de la creme would be an intelligence agent to act as a double agent. So again, this would be the Soviet Union era. The FBI recruited a KGB defector that initially acted as a double agent on behalf of the FBI, and eventually the FBI, and we'll get into this story too, eventually through reasons of safety and protection, because sooner or later this, you could say, and I use the word game a lot, sometimes we use the game in the military, war games, and I'm not trying to, it has a double meaning sometimes I use this word, the spy game, because it is a game where government money is being siphoned for programs that aren't needed. But otherwise, it could be a game of life and death. So anyway, sooner or later in the game of espionage, the double agent is going to need to be exfiltrated from the country of origin into usually the host country that would be ours. So it would be America. Rarely they would be exfiltrated to a third country. It's possible, it depends. There's a lot of moving parts, but the country that would be most safe for this double agent would be back to the host nation's intelligence agency. So if that person was being handled by the CIA or the FBI, the safest place is to get them back to America where they're safe and they're put on the payroll. And so that's what happened. The KGB agent is now under cloaked identity, a new name, new alias, new driver's license, everything. And that person works confidentially for the FBI as a consultant. Really, it's from there. As like all industries have inside consultants, that person then, because that person is no longer utilized as a double agent, because obviously the Soviet Union knows that that person has fled the country. That person is working for the American intelligence agency. So the double agent operation now is complete. It's ended. It's been terminated. And now that person resides in America. And the best way to explain this person's type of work is that person is a sourced, confidential consultant. I mean, we use the word asset, but it's basically a consultant. And with that consultant, that person is utilized by that intelligence agencies for many purposes. And one of these purposes was to me, meaning they put that person on loan to me, where I was able to have a one-on-one conversation with this person. It wasn't lengthy. I think we talked for about a couple hours. And that person would train me about at least their trade craft and their story and everything that they worked under the Soviet Union. So it could be used for multiple purposes. One of the issues that I felt that the FBI was very behind, and this is all the agencies compared, is you have to remember when I was in the FBI, it was 2004 to 2007. The number one mission of the FBI, and it still is, and I'm not arguing with this in general, but it's counterterrorism. And I should do a story later on 9/11, and I didn't work counterterrorism. But anyway, counterterrorism is number one. And 2004 to 2007, we know that. That was probably, you could say, a peak at the war on terror. So that's where the number one mission is. And then the second mission is foreign counterintelligence. But the FBI and all the intelligence agencies, our modus operandus for understanding intelligence operations, whether it's counterintelligence, foreign intelligence, we were still under the model of the Soviet Union, the KGB. And obviously there's new competitors out there like the Chinese. And I could tell that we were not operating like we should. And that should not be a surprise to anyone, where the government is usually 2 steps behind the private sector. And I should do videos on that in terms of really how the private sector is the tip of the spear, you could say, and not the government. So we were still operating in the old Soviet model. The Soviet Union was done, even though they're still I was about to say a lethal threat, but we'll just say a definitely a very serious threat. And I've always said this, I don't believe Russia and China are the primary enemies, not at all. But they are. They're threats to be dealt with. And I never said they're our allies. And there's certain ways to deal with them that I'll probably do in other episodes that come back to leadership. So again, during this time, I was able to talk with this person. Again, think of like a consultant, where they would talk about what their training was and what I could learn from it. And we had a bit of rapport for a couple reasons. The first reason was this person, I'm not going to obviously say the identity, but this person started out in the Soviet Union, graduated their version of their military academy, so their version of West Point. So similar like me, they also were a former Army officer. They graduated at that time from the Soviet Union's military academy. Upon completion of military service, that person was accepted into the KGB, and it was a big deal. What's also very interesting is, at that time, back in 2005, I could speak Chinese. Obviously, we're talking Mandarin Chinese. I'm not saying I was that fluent in it. I mean, right now, I'll do other videos, but I'm so fluent in Mandarin now, I could probably pass on the telephone for Chinese. I've done it many times. In 2005, we're just going to say I was conversational. My reading and writing was probably beginner level, though. Reading and writing was difficult. And I would say I could speak Chinese as a total foreigner, probably conversational. So definitely not a beginner level. I don't even think I'd say intermediate, but I'd say conversational. So that was my level. He found that interesting because when he entered the KGB, he was slotted with Chinese. And I could do other videos, but most people may know, but the relationship between Russia and China, it's very nebulous. Allies at times, you could say, they say frenemies, friends and enemies. So the point being is, he was trained in the Chinese language to target China, even though technically China and Russia are allies. So it's a very kind of a little bit of a confusing relationship. I believe right now the relationship between China and Russia is very good, because many times they have a common enemy, you could say, like America. And this is where I would agree with Trump in terms of Ukraine, stay out of it. It's not our fight, but I don't want to go into that. So he was originally slotted, this is back with the KGB agent, he was originally slotted to learn the Chinese language and to target China. He told me, obviously this is a Russian, so his mother language was Russian. He told me that the Chinese language was so difficult. And it is a pretty difficult language to learn, there's no doubt. I'll do videos in the future about ways to learn foreign languages. I'm also fluent in the German language, so I have a knack for learning foreign languages, and there are some ways that can help you to learn foreign languages. But anyway, he purposely flunked out. This is his story telling me. He purposely flunked out of the Chinese language lessons because he just said it was too difficult. And that also happens too in America. Even our intelligence agency, many people just fail out of the Chinese stream and they put them on an easier track. Spanish, working South America, Russian, the Russian language would be easier, or stuff like that. So he purposely failed out of the Chinese language. He thought it was too difficult. And he was then slotted for English. Well, then you know what target that would. It would be in the United States of America. So then he was studying English. And then he originally, like any normal intelligence agent, he took that job to duty, and he was going to target America the best he could. And his job was also primarily, along with other objectives, was to recruit an American intelligence agent. Primarily, mostly would be FBI or CIA, but there could be other, a State Department, a foreign intelligence officer, maybe a military diplomat. You get what I mean. But he started his job with absolute duty on our country would be the best way I could do it. And during that tenure, things would change. And that's where I'm going to get into that specific data point that he told me, that even back then, it was starting to make me think about America and America's future. And no, this is not something that says, wow, Russia's great. Wow, China's great. Again, I probably know more about China than probably anyone in the US government, not the private sector. The private sector is where I consider the best and the brightest are. So I'm not gonna put my credentials to people in the private sector. It depends. In the US government, oh no, these people. So again, I want to make this known. This talk is not to say, wow, Russia's great, China's great, you should move there. Not at all. But what I am pointing out is America's future. Believe it or not, my videos are going to age like fine wine for the same reason I left in 2010. It's going to happen. You're going to see this empire is going to fall. So what I want to do is, before we go into the world of espionage, the best way to give a great example is, so picture again the Cold War, where you have the CIA and the FBI up against the KGB and also their military intelligence, the GRU. But again, it's kind of spy versus spy. What I want to emphasize espionage, and we're going to keep it real simple because we can look at it from very different angles. Espionage is an art and science upon itself, but we're going to look at power and skill set. And that skill set is the human intelligence aspect, and power and skill set. And the best way I could look at power is, it's going to sound kind of corny, apples and oranges, but I want to compare, because it just comes to my mind really quick, two scenarios because I have personal experience. Think of the military, especially special operations, light infantry. So think of light infantry tactics, and then we're going to do another one about boxing, but think of light infantry tactics and the most creme de la creme special operations light infantry, you could say, fighting force. The Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers, Delta Force, this elite light infantry. So we're talking basically men with rifles. And they are trained, we'll say, we're given the benefit of the doubt, the highest skill level. Now, if they go against other light infantry, because their skill level is so high, they should win. But what if they go against another force that may not have skill level, but their power is at a higher level? What would that power be? Well, we're just going to say a higher caliber gun, a higher caliber machine. Or what happens when light infantry faces armor? These would be tanks, lightly armored infantry vehicles. Generally speaking, if you know anything about light infantry special operations, you better hide or run, meaning you don't want to get in a gunfight with a higher caliber person, with a person with a higher caliber machine gun. Even though your techniques and tactics skill level may be higher, you're going to be in trouble. So I want to emphasize power is important. The same thing with my time in boxing. I'm a heavyweight boxer. I stand 6'5" and I box around 230, 240 pounds. There were times during training that I would fight against professional boxers. I remember one time when I was stationed in Germany, I was training with the US Army boxing team. Now this is sparring. When I say we're talking sparring practice. Sometimes we get pros in. One of the pros was the #1 professional boxer for Germany, all of Germany, but the person was a lightweight. That person's skill level was better than me, without a doubt. The problem was my size. He was about 5'10", I think, and I don't think he weighed more than 150 pounds. And because of my size and my reach were so big, I'm not going to say I dominated the fight, but he didn't beat me at all. And so power. And I want to emphasize, so I just gave you an example of, you could say, small unit infantry tactics, where we'll just say Army Rangers and Navy SEALs, the best of the best. But if they come across a higher caliber machine gun or armor, they're in trouble. The same thing with the fight sport. You could have a great skill level, but if you come across a bigger person, we're not saying size and power is everything, but it's important. Now I'm going to relate that to espionage. You're like, that makes no sense. How can these examples mean anything to espionage? Well, I'm going to show you, and it relates to America. So when you're doing the recruiting structure, so again, we're trying to recruit them, the KGB, and the KGB is trying to recruit us. And again, this is where, at the time, the defector was telling me that his life and life in the Soviet Union, and their mechanisms and how much power they had. And I realized that I want to show this to the audience, that we as America, we won the Cold War. So the question is, did the CIA and the FBI defeat the KGB because we were better skilled? It goes back to that analogy of the boxer or that Navy SEAL. Were we better skilled at American intelligence, or we're just going to say not American intel, but intelligence operations over our enemy like the KGB? Is that why we won? That we were just better intelligence agents and they weren't? And after I had a talk with them, I realized not so. And what did we have that the KGB didn't have? We had power. And I'm gonna explain what that meant. So the same reason that you can have a boxer that may not be as skilled as the other boxer, but he's just so big, he's just a big guy, he may win the fight, but not because he's a better skill. Or like I said, in a light infantry, if you roll in there with an Abrams A1 tank, those Navy SEALs and Rangers better run or they're dead. So it's not because of skill, it's power. So what power are we talking about here? I've seen some videos on YouTube of intelligence agents talking about the recruitment cycle, this and that. And generally, I would say it's on there. There's a couple things they're missing, though. I might do a video on it. But one thing they've said, and I think all the viewers could understand, one element that is key in terms of recruiting people is money. It is. And I've talked about that before. Remember, I keep saying about America's corporate, it's all about the money. People leave the FBI because maybe they had more money in the civilian world, Dan Bongino, or maybe FBI agents who didn't want to quit because of the money. But we all have to agree that money is a major source of how the world goes round, and that includes in the espionage world. So I'm going to give you one example. I'm going to break this into two areas, but one is about money. So when people commit espionage or there's taskings, one of the reasons they may be doing it for a foreign intelligence agency is because they want to make money. Well, at that time with the Soviet Union compared to America, if we tasked the KGB for a task for us and we would give them money versus the KGB trying to task with us. So again, just picture a scenario. It would never work this way, but just for understanding in terms of, I guess you could say, education purposes, try to picture this example where you have a KGB agent on this side and an FBI CIA agent on this side. And the KGB agent says, I want you to work for me. And the FBI CIA says, no, I want you to work for me. And then the KGB agent says, well, for every task that you do for me, I'm going to give you $5,000 US. And the FBI CIA says, for every task that you do for me, we'll give you $50,000 US. And oh, by the way, $50,000 US compared to the Soviet Union, how far it could go versus America. You do the ratios of the value of money, the US dollar back then. So the point is, whatever they could offer us in terms of money, I mean, we could 10 times it. We just had the budget. So that's the first element of power, and that's pure money. We just had a lot more money to spend to, you could say, solicit these foreign agents than they did for us. And it's very similar in terms of not because we were a better agency, but we just had that budget. And where did we get that money? Well, we got that money from, you could say, the US taxpayers, the economy. And this goes into the second level of money. I see some comments there of, well, I'll answer some of these once I'm done with this because it's key. The second element is when you, and this was the case also exactly what this KGB defector said, and it's normal. Sooner or later, if you play, for lack of a better word, I say the word play, the espionage games, you are going to have to leave your country. Now, I didn't leave America for anything. I've never been under arrest. I quit the FBI, and I just left America because it's collapsing. So it's not, don't relate that to my story. But if you're underplaying the espionage game, you're eventually going to have to leave your country. Otherwise, you're going to be arrested and put to death. This is just normally how it works. So now under the power game, we have to look at it. You have to go back to the Soviet Union. I'm not saying Russia even today is a great place to live. Again, I'm not a Russian expert on it. Maybe it is, maybe not. But definitely go back to the days of the Soviet Union, and also go back how America was decades ago compared to what it is now. So my point is sooner or later, you're going to have to exfiltrate. So now go back to that same conversation where the KGB and the FBI or CIA are talking to each other, work for me, no work for me, how much money, this and that. But then the second element is, would you like, on the KGB, would you like to live in the Soviet Union? Because eventually when your work is done, then they will do it. And there have been American agents who've defected, not many. And so the question is, or the proposal is, come live in the Soviet Union. Or the reverse is, the FBI and the CIA is come live in America. And at that time, what is America? Probably one of the best countries to live in. The medical care, the education, the freedom, the everything. Meaning, what was more appetizing? An FBI or CIA agent saying, wow, I've always wanted to live in the Soviet Union, versus a KGB agent thinking, wow, I could take me and his family included. I'm going to take me and my children and my wife, and we're going to live in America, send my kids to college, the medical care, everything. So that is an element of power that wasn't created by the intelligence agencies, whether it's the KGB or the FBI. That was created by the country itself, maybe through good government, good private sector, whatever it was. But at that time, America was the land of milk and honey. We had a lot of money to spend, and it was a phenomenal place to live. So many people want to make intelligence agents out to be these James Bond. A good analogy of an intelligence agent, believe it or not, is a salesman. A salesman also has especially a used car salesman, it has a bit of a negative connotation, which is good. That's many times as an intelligence agent. So please don't think of an intelligence agent like a Jason Bourne. The best way is think of that person as a salesman. Now, you are the salesman. You are America. And I want you to sell this beautiful car. It's a Ferrari for half the price, discounted. How good of a salesman do you need to be to sell a Lamborghini, or just picture this phenomenal car for half the price? Versus another salesman, this person has to sell a piece of junk that's overpriced. Because if you're going to sell a piece of junk overpriced, you better be a phenomenal salesman. Think of tradecraft. Versus if I tell you to sell this wonderful piece of merchandise that everybody pretty much wants at a discounted rate, you got to be a moron not to sell it. So your tradecraft doesn't need to be as good as Hollywood likes to tell you. I know I'm changing the story, but the first thing that comes to my mind is the Delta Force operator going to Afghanistan fighting the Taliban. How much money do you think we put into Delta Force to train them? The money that we spent? How much money do you think the Taliban, I mean, these guys in sandals and AK-47, how much money do you think they were invested on? So it's a bit of apples and oranges. And we all know eventually the Soviet Union collapsed. So at that time, at least monetary wise, but again, it's not just the money. Remember, I keep talking about America's going to collapse. It's not just about the money, and we're going to do a video, but even the Soviet Union, I mean, at that time, do you want to live in communism? Does communism really sound appealing? So there you are as an FBI CIA agent, and they're offering you not so much money compared, and the ticket to live in the Soviet Union. How appealing is that for you? Versus we're recruiting the KGB and we're giving them a lot more money, and we are giving them a ticket to America, which I truly believe, just like Donald Trump said, make America great again. If you go toward America's history past, it was probably the best country on earth. So then ask yourself, don't think intelligence tradecraft, just think like a salesman, just a typical salesman. How hard or easy is it to do? And so when I go back, did the FBI and the CIA win the espionage Cold War because we were so good and the KGB wasn't? Or did we just have so much back support in terms of economic money in America just being a phenomenal country? And the answer came from the KGB defector, the same thing. He wasn't as impressed with the FBI and the CIA like the Hollywood movies said. He just said, though, the amount of money that they could throw versus the KGB was on an exponentially different level. And two, he admitted it. He's like living. I should do some videos later. I had some old clips about the Soviet Union. He compared, and now he's been living in America for decades now, so he can compare life in the Soviet Union versus life in America. He's like, I wouldn't trade it for the world, meaning he's so happy he's come to America. So that was already created, like you could say, the American dream. Wasn't the FBI? I mean, I don't believe, make America great again. That wasn't created by the U.S. government. That was created by, you could say, much about the private sector. Maybe the government helped in some ways. Sometimes the military wins a strategic war, but it was the private sector many times based upon our values of Christian faith, European culture, and freedom. And so we were able to build, not me, I mean, our forefathers were able to build a phenomenal country, which also included money. And our ability to sell that was just on an exponentially another level than what the KGB could sell us on the Soviet Union. So I want to let that sink in, because now we're going to go to part two. But I just realized that if this economic engine, and again, it's not all about money that makes America great, like our freedoms, like our European family, our culture, our Christian faith, all this stuff. But when this starts dwindling, and it has, we know that, like all empires go, then ask yourself, are people going to want to be coming or leaving? And that's where we're going to do the final the video that I'll show. Let me just go to quick questions right here, if there's any on here. The Mujahideen, yeah, like I said, I mean, I'll do videos. One of my West Point classmates was in Delta Force, and I get it. I'm not saying the FBI and the CIA and the Delta, we still are just world-renowned agencies. But it's because primarily of the backing of I think it was Ross Perot, which he would have been an interesting president. I think he said something like, you cannot be a military superpower. Think of intelligence, secure. He goes, before we want to be a military superpower, we need to make sure we continue to be an economic superpower. Because even when Ross Perot was running against, I think it was the senior Bush and Bill Clinton, he was like a third-party candidate. He was already warning us that this economy is going down. And once the economy goes down, well, then who's going to pay for all these fun government programs? It's cool when you hear the Delta Force and the FBI person say, yeah, we have multi-million-dollar budgets. We'll spend whatever, millions and millions of dollars. Yeah, where's that money coming from? It's coming from taxpayers. So if we don't have a good economy to pay for all this stuff, well, that ain't going to work. So back to Ross Perot, he said it clearly, before we want to be this superpower of intelligence, of security, of military, we got to make sure we're an economic superpower. We're not. You're going to see it too. I'll do examples. But this empire's fallen. So I go back to that time with the defector, because I was went into the intelligence thinking we are the best and the brightest and this and that, but we had a lot of backing. And again, the best way to understand that is picture the Taliban, because a lot of times intelligence is cloaked behind closed doors, where the military is a little bit more on the open, meaning there's a war. But picture the Mujahideen like it was given by Shane, or the Taliban, and just ask yourself, even though you may have not researched it in depth, what's your gut feeling? How much money and backing do you think a typical Taliban soldier is versus a special operations soldier? It's not even close to the amount of money that's going in there. So are we such good soldiers because we're the best and the brightest, or do we have a lot of backing behind it? I think if we didn't have that backing, it'd be a whole different story. And that's what you're seeing in America. Let me look at the questions first, and I'm gonna kind of shift it I'm going to extrapolate on that point about America. So what I just want to do, let me just look at the time here quick, 30. So what I want to do is this. At the time that I'm not in contact anymore with the KGB defector. It's been a while since I've left America. But when I left America in 2010, how is America going? I'm telling you, it's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And when I left America in 2010, again, I don't have any specific data points, but I still don't think it was a common occurrence for a typical American man who had a, successful career in America to say, I'm leaving, this ship is falling. It's different now. It's different. It's becoming more and more mainstream of America's leaving, where America is becoming less appetizing. Trump is attempting to keep America competitive by attracting the best and the brightest. But what have I said? I'm not a fan of illegal immigration. I say again, I'm not, whether how smart these foreign nationals are or not, America must maintain a Christian nation. It must maintain a European nation, and it must maintain a freedom of speech nation. Otherwise, I don't care what type of rocket scientist you're going to get from China, or you're going to get from whatever Indian country or whatever. It ain't going to work. But you're seeing that a lot with Trump. He wants to keep this economic engine going. So his view is, okay, legal immigration's bad, but legal immigration, that's how we keep this money train going. It ain't going to work. I feel we're going to go to a final video, but the way I look at America is this. And so you're seeing, too, the dysfunction also of our intelligence agencies. It's not as functional as you see. And like I said, just from what you've seen in public news about, I would not be surprised if even Kash Patel gets removed from the FBI director. I don't have much faith in him, but we've already had multiple FBI directors been terminated. It's not going good either way. The CIA, the intel, even our military, just by the thought that Donald Trump wanted Pete Hegseth, and he's right because he feels the military is dysfunctional. But I picture America like this now, not when I left in 2010, but I'm starting to feel like it's now. Here's an analogy. Picture Americans on a bus. I'm picturing some type of vehicle. Maybe it's a plane, maybe it's a bus, maybe it's a train, but it's some type of moving apparatus, and we're all in it together. And while we're in this bus, everyone on the bus is hearing noises that this engine is not working very correctly. There's noises, ba-bang, ba-bang, squeaky tires. Like everyone's looking at themselves thinking, this train, bus, or airplane doesn't sound like it's doing very well. Like it's going to fall apart any minute. We know that. Something big is going to happen. We feel it. Maybe next year, the collapse. Everyone is feeling more and more that this thing called America, this bus, we could say, is going to crash. We don't know when, we don't know how, but it's going. Most Americans, though, when you look out the window of this bus, all you see is desert. So it's very scary to get off the bus. Now, if you're a rich person, and there's been many studies of the rich Americans, they already have their second passports. They already have their other houses abroad. They could call up a helicopter to pick them up from the bus and take them there. But to most Americans, leaving America, it's scary. It's a tough thing to do. There's some people like myself, we said, screw it, we're going to take the risk and we're going to go. But most Americans are like, listen, I looked out of the windows. I know this bus is going to break. It's going to break down. It's going to crash. But I just don't have the courage or the know-how to get off this bus because there's a big desert out there. I don't know what to do. So what are most Americans doing? They're just going to wait for the bus to crash. But we know it's coming. And that's what I'm saying is, more and more. So we're going to just do one video. I'm going to do another video later on purely Americans leaving. And no, that's not necessarily the absolute answer to leave America. But I'm telling you, sooner or later, you're seeing these videos of Americans. They're upset. They're not satisfied. They're paying their taxes. And what are you going to do? Keep doing this? And there's some Americans that are just, some Americans look and say, you're a traitor for leaving. I don't know. Let's look at if you're an American and you work for a corporation. Just very simple. You work for a corporation and that corporation treats you horribly. They underpay you. They treat you horribly. I mean, this is not a new story. We all know this. They don't treat you very well. And you tell one of your colleagues, you're going to quit. You're going to find another job. You're going to start your own business. Or maybe you got an offer from another corporation. What if your colleague says, no, man, you don't quit this corporation. You need to be loyal to it, man. You need to stay in this corporation and make it better. You need to work your way up and change. It would sound the most ludicrous thing you'd ever heard. Say, no, man, I'm quitting this corporation. But you see that with some Americans, And it's part of the corporation mentality is some Americans do get the courage and they leave America. And it's dangerous, and we need to talk about some countries are good. I mean, I wouldn't recommend coming to China. That wouldn't be my recommendation. Hong Kong's a little different. But anyway, or Taiwan, it could possibly also be a good option. But anyway, there's this sort of negativity of how dare you leave America? Why? I mean, is that what we would tell our forefathers who left Europe? Don't leave Europe. You know, you're born in Europe, you need to stay in Europe. I mean, they left. But the point is, there comes a time where you're just like me. I have very little patience and I have a very high risk tolerance. I'm not going to take this stuff. I'm not going to pay my taxes. I'm not going to take the way, particularly white men, heterosexual white men, Christian white men, you know, strong white men, European white men are treated in America. It's absolutely horrible. I think I would just do violence. I just wouldn't take that by women, by immigrants, by women, by our government, how military veterans are treated. No way. And so I never looked at violence, but I said, I'm leaving. Now, if you want to stay and fix the system, good luck to you. But notice how they say how to fix it, go out there and vote. Yeah, I have no faith in voting. So there's other ways we could talk about how to fix the system if you're going to stay in America, but it's probably going to go to a guns and ammo. But I laugh. But you notice that when people leave America, they really sort of get angry with you, like you're a traitor, you know. But it's okay to leave a blue state, go to a red state. That's okay. It's okay for our forefathers to have left Europe, come to America. That's okay. And it's okay to quit a corporation or your job if they're not treating you okay. Well, so what's this deal that if you leave America? But it's okay too for foreigners, especially if you're a true MAGA person and you like that legal immigration, especially if those foreigners are smart, they pay. It's good to come into America, but you can't leave. It's almost sounds like North Korea. You can come in, but you can't go out. That's kind of weird. I think a lot of Americans in many ways might be jealous, misery loves company, because some of these Americans leave. And truth be told, I really got on podcasts because what the FBI was doing to me overseas. But if I never travel back to America for the rest of my life again, I'm fine. I mean, I can make it maybe a couple things that I'd like to. You know, my father died. There was a funeral, stuff like that in America. That would have been good. But overall, if I never am able to go back to America, I'm fine. And this is another reason why my story doesn't want to be put out to America, because they don't want it. I know I'm Joe. We'll get to the video, and I don't want to talk about Pat Tillman, but we all know that the American government suppresses stories that have, even though they're true, that have bad connotations that make the American government look bad. I have a story that I don't purposely want to make the American government look bad, but what they did is betray to me. And at the end of the day, you have an American citizen born and raised in America, and I left. And you know something? Life overseas isn't as bad as you think. It's just not. I'm not advocating to leave, but I'm telling you, this system's going to collapse. And if you don't leave America, that's fine. You better get ready to fight in America. Let's just do one quick video here to just sort of see what life is like. And again, I'm going to do a video on this, but this trend is happening.
The United States, the land of opportunity. For decades, people from around the world have dreamed of making it here. But today, a surprising trend is emerging. Americans themselves are choosing to leave. But why? What's making people give up the...
And so I want to pause here. I want to go back to that KGB agent. Back in the Soviet Union era, and back where America was, you know, could be the best of the best. You know, picture the I think maybe the best America, maybe the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, something like that. So if America doesn't get as appealing as it once was, what's going to happen? It's going to affect everything in our life, to include intelligence.
American dream, in search of a better future somewhere else? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth behind why so many Americans are saying, it's time to go. Once upon a time, the American dream meant stability, home ownership, affordable education, and a better life for your children. But in today's America, that dream is fading. Healthcare is the most expensive in the world. Student debt has crossed $1.7 trillion. Home ownership feels out of reach for younger generations. What used to be a promise now feels like a burden. From sunny Portugal to the jungles of Costa Rica, from the digital nomad hubs of Thailand to the vibrant cities of Mexico, Americans are exploring new homes abroad. And the benefits? Lower cost of living, affordable or free healthcare, remote work opportunities, slower pace of life, and stronger communities. In many of these countries, people say they've finally found peace, freedom, and balance, things they struggled to afford in the U.S. Imagine paying $500 a month for a beautiful apartment, or walking into a hospital without fear of going bankrupt, or retiring comfortably without $1 million pension. Many Americans have realized that living well doesn't have to cost a fortune. And sometimes, living abroad is the only way to truly be free. It's not just about what's out there. It's also about what's happening here at home. Rising political polarization, gun violence and mass shootings, climate anxiety and natural disasters, lack of work-life balance. For many, it's not just about money. It's about safety, sanity, and sustainability. It's not just one group. Millennials and Gen Z are becoming digital nomads. Retirees are seeking quiet and comfort in countries with lower healthcare costs. Families are moving for better education and community values. In 2023 alone, over 9 million Americans were living abroad, and that number is growing fast. Of course, moving abroad isn't a magic fix. There are visa rules, language barriers, cultural differences. Some critics say it's an escape rather than a solution, but for those who've made the leap, the verdict is often the same. It changed my life. The American dream isn't dead. It's just migrating to new places, new lives, and new possibilities.
So what I want to do is relate that, and I need to do other videos on that, people moving abroad. And I have firsthand experience. Again, I left in 2010, and that is you have to go back to that KGB defector. When you leave your country, I'm assuming I'm talking to mostly Americans on here. You were probably like me. I don't know how old you are, but when I grew up in America, never did I imagine leaving America, except for a vacation or doing, maybe a military deployment. But when I grew up in America, there was never a feeling of Americans wanting to leave America. It wasn't. Even my father growing up, he said, America's the best place on earth. Everyone wants to come to America. So back then, go back to that FBI or CIA agent trying to convince the KGB agent, work with us and leave your country and we'll help you move to America. That's a big deal because flip it around. Because the KGB tried that on the FBI. Hey, leave America and come to the Soviet Union. Yeah, good luck. But it's a big deal leaving your country. And what's happening now more and more? They're leaving. And I'm not, and this is again why my story doesn't want to come out. It's a bad story. And I'm not did this on purpose. I'm going to give you an example. When I left in 2010, you may hear stories like this, maybe from these liberals. I didn't leave America in 2010 saying, screw you, America, I hate you. No way. I was born and raised in America. I'm very thankful that I was born and raised in America. But as I grew up and before I left, I realized that the value systems that I was taught, particularly at West Point, about duty, honor, country, are not the value systems anymore in America. This is no longer capitalism in America. As much as you think, oh, yeah, this is not capitalism. This is globalism in America. This is corporate cronyism in America. This is anti-white culture. This is anti-Christian culture. None of these values are aligned to me. So I didn't complain for the same reason when I left the FBI and I quit and never got fired. I never were like, screw you, you people are evil. I just said, listen, this is not working out. I appreciate you giving the opportunity. And then I just reported my things to Senator Chuck Grassley because I just thought that was the right thing to do. But I'm not going to argue, but I left. But the point being is these stories of Americans who leave America and then say, not because we want to screw American government, but we say, you know something? Life isn't that bad. Because unless you leave America, think about it. If you're an American, you say America is the best country on earth. I don't know. How many countries have you lived in? How do you know? So I say again, and we're going to end it here because I need to do other videos on, moving abroad, but they don't want a story like me of a kid growing up in America, becoming an Eagle Scout with Boy Scouts going to West Point. And I didn't mean to have a fight. I left America. I just wanted to be left alone. And this United States government has continued to attack me. And if you're an American citizen, you're probably going to realize through common sense that the biggest enemy that's taking away your faith, your family, your freedom, it's not Russia, it's not China, it's not the Taliban, it's not Saddam Hussein. We murdered that guy. Perhaps it's our own government, and it's going to get worse. And when it gets worse and worse and worse, to include our economy, guess what's going to be affected? All these money-sucking government programs, like our intelligence, like these elite Delta Force, all this stuff, because Ross Perot was right. Unless we're an economic superpower, and it's not just about money, unless we have a country that we're willing to work together and strive in, everything else will fall. And I really think it's not going to work because, like I said, we have abandoned our Christian faith. We have abandoned our European culture. And when I say European, I'm talking about race, our racially European culture. And I think we've abandoned our freedom to include, I mean, the amount of censorship of First Amendment free speech is amazing. So I want to leave it at that. If there's any final questions, I'll take it. But I really think at the end, when this, now remember, it was just starting again in 2005, but when the KGB Defector, I realized that we won and he lost. I'm not really going to say because we were so much better than them, meaning spy versus spy. Perhaps I believe we just had a whole lot more money than they had, and the attraction of America, coming to America, versus the attraction of going to the Soviet Union was probably night and day. And he said it too. He's like, wow. And so maybe that was why we won the Cold War from an espionage point, and not so because our FBI agents, our CIA, were just so skilled. That was from my take. And now at a broadened picture, like I've said, because I also have firsthand experience, I left America in 2010, and it's not like I'm rubbing it in on the American government. I just want to be left alone. But if I never am able to go back to America for the rest of my life again, it's okay. It's not bad. There's a lot of places in this world that are really nice. And my biggest issue with this United States government is leave me the fuck alone. If you have a problem with me, stop going behind my back and have the courage and the honor to face me man to man and level whatever allegations which are false to my face. And to all the politicians who've ignored me, the only good thing I could say is, I'm so glad I don't pay my tax money to you shitbags. And to the American people, I want you to know that my story is probably just one of many. This is happening more and more. And so we'll do stories of the Boston Tea Party when it comes back to taxes, because come back to money. But sooner or later, I think Americans are going to realize that this country is not working for you anymore, but you continue to pay your taxes. Why should they change? And there's probably another read, like I said, where the American government does not want my story told, that sort of you could say an all-American kid has left America. I'm not rubbing in their face. I'm just saying the other, it's not as bad as people think. And that when you look in the world, these supposedly enemies, Venezuela, are probably, not probably, I'll stake my soul on, are not the primary enemies. They still could be enemies. They're not the primary enemy. And the primary enemy that is destroying your life is from America within. And that's the primary reason I left America, because the value system was off. That's enough. Let me just look on here. Fontes, hate to break it to you, but the Boy Scouts are no longer. Yeah, it's weird. I write this in the book, but I think one of the biggest my boyhood things was I was really into Boy Scouts, and I was, Cub Scouts, Weeblos, and then I became an Eagle Scout. And what's happened to the Boy Scouts? I could talk about the whole feminism, never should have let girls in. Always happens. When women come in, they fuck things up, just like they screwed up West Point. So, women don't want to be infiltrated by transsexuals, leave us alone. But man, they come here. But I guess you could almost say there's so many data points to give of the falling America. But think of Boy Scouts, such a phenomenal organization for young boys. Well, that's done. And there's so many things to include. I told you about West Point. So the system is falling. And when the system is falling, and people don't want to come to America anymore, want to leave. But I say it, the answer, I disagree with Donald Trump. The answer is not, let's make America more attractive for all these high-skilled, and they could be high-skilled, Indians and Chinese. It won't work, people. I'll do another video, and it also has to do with intelligence. They will always have their loyalty to their motherland. And if they're, however racist it sounds, but this is why I'm very thankful that living in China, because once you see the racism in China, you don't feel racist anymore as a white man to talk about this stuff. So I'm still not a proponent of legal immigration, no matter how smart they are. But if these are immigrants who are Christian, who are European, and who value freedom, I'm definitely much more flexible, open. Just like you as a white man can immigrate to, say, a Western country like Canada and Australia and England, I definitely could see reciprocity. They come there. But to non-Western, non-Christian, non-European countries, no, I'm not a fan of it, no matter how smart and successful they are. But that's another video. I think that's it. I don't think we have any other questions. Again, I appreciate your time. This is David Baumblatt from Terabant Leadership. And like I said, you are going to see, just like I mentioned about America, you're going to see more and more data points like my video itself, that it shows our systems aren't working anymore. They're becoming more and more dysfunctional. And the American empire is collapsing before our eyes. And there was a time where the FBI and the CIA could much easily recruit foreign agents to come to America. Look how much money we have. And if that doesn't happen anymore in the future, and it's not, it's getting worse and worse, then it sort of shows you at a microcosm of what's going to happen in America. And I believe it's probably going to be similar, like all things that happen in history, just like the Roman Empire. America's days are numbered sooner or later. So again, I'll do a video, but I still say you pretty much have two choices. Either one, leave America, or you need to build your home base in America. And I believe, like I said, state politics is the future of America. It's no longer going to be federal politics. Thank you for your time. This is David Baumblatt from Terabant Leadership, telling the Patriots, appreciate your support. Lead to victory.